Hello, everyone. It's an honor for me to have the privilege to chair this meeting. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished professors, all guests, all participants from all over the world, I would like to say good morning, good evening, and good afternoon from wherever you are in the world. And welcome you once again to the Conference on Non-Capitalist Mixed Economies, Theory, History, and the Future. My name is Fikadu Tolosayane. I'm from Ethiopia. I'm a political scientist by profession and currently studying my PhD at Corvinus University of Budapest. And this is an online conference organized, as briefly mentioned by Attila Meleg, the co-organized by Carl Polanyi Research Center for Global Social Studies of Corvinus University, Esmelet Journal, College for Advanced Studies in Social Theory, and all other partner organizations include Institutul pentru Solidaritate Socială, a working group for public policy, HESIET, and the Fordulat, the Critique Attack, the Left East Geopolitical Research Group, Transform Europe, Institute of Political History, Social Theory Research Group, the Polanyi Institute, the International Carl Polanyi Institute, the Study Group on Global Labor History and Social Conflict of the Universidade Nova de Lisboa. And so this conference is organized in the spirit of the international cooperation, as you might understand, and it means a lot. And this conference is supported by Rosa Luxemburg Foundation, and we are extremely grateful to the foundation as well. This is an online international conference which is supposed to take upon the non-capitalist mixed economy models as an eminent, important historical experience, practical possibility, and much needed prospect. The current moment of global capitalism and the evolving ecological crisis demands an organized and coherent response, the one that is not only limited to pushing back the force of social and environmental destruction, but aims at fundamentally transforming the unproductive and unjust structures of capitalism today. And therefore, in this process, revisiting, learning from the history of the socialist achievement, errors, and helping the coalesce and intensify and the spread of search for the new models is very crucial. And therefore, we are basically expecting a deeper insight, not into what has been viewed as a socialist failure so far over the last couple of decades, but the dynamics of historical trajectories that the socialist experimentation has taken place over the last century. And we are also meant to look into the current dynamics and therefore to the future prospects from the heated debate that would feature this conference in the coming days. This conference is dedicated to the memory of Győző Lugosi. Győző Lugosi is a historian, a social scientist, educator, culture worker, editor, and former associate professor at ELTE University of Budapest, who left us on the 7th April of 2021. And by the way, that was the day I was also celebrating my 35th birthday, and so I'm fortunate that we lost him. And he has an extensive academic service of 28 years as an editor and managing editor, as well as author at Esmelet Journal, and widely acknowledged among the academic community in Hungary. He is known to have been a very strong advocate and proponent of the African neo-Marxist Samir Amin, and an advocate of a strong advocate of world systems theory. And we all know Lugosi for the fact that he fought all forms of anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, Russophobia, and racism, which he interpreted as a destruction of the class consciousness. He also stood against Eurocentric perspectives that naturalized the Western rule over the world under the banner of democracy and human rights, which are considered as legendary. And Giozzo dedicated his entire life to the communally organized and collectively liberating society. And we remember him, and may his soul rest in eternal peace. And so we dedicate this conference to him. For the technical details, I think Andres can hear us. And so I would put the email and the contact number in case you face any difficulty to the chat, so that every participant could reach out Andres for any technical challenge. And also I'm putting the details of the a biography of the speakers and the detailed program for the next for the coming days. Again, on the chat, I have already put there, and so all participants can check out from there. And without any further ado, I would be opening this preliminary session as to why we needed to organize this series of conference. And our first speaker in this regard would be Professor Radhika Desai. Professor Radhika Desai is a professor at the Department of Political Studies and a director of Geopolitical Economy Research Group, University of Manitoba, Winnipeg, Canada. She has just started her third term as the president of the Society for Socialist Studies, and she has proposed a new historical materialist approach to the understanding of the world affairs, geopolitical economy based on materiality of nations. Some of her recent books include Geopolitical Economy After the US Hegemony, Globalization and the Empire. And another one, Karl Polanyi, 21st and 21st Century Capitalism, 2020 co-edited. And Revolutions, again co-edited. Her articles and book chapters appear in international scholarly journals and edited volumes. With Alan Freeman, she also co-edited Geopolitical Economy book series with the Manchester Press and the Future of Capitalism book series with the Pluto Press. And with this, I would give the floor to Professor Radhika Desai. And Radhika Desai, you're kindly welcomed.
Thank you so much. And I must say, I'm really so pleased to be here among so many people who I know already and so many other people who I really want to get to know. So I'm really looking forward to the next few days of discussions. When Attila has asked me to address the question why we are holding this conference, and I'm just going to make a few remarks. Hopefully not stepping on too many toes of my co-panelists to follow. When Attila first told me that he was thinking of having this conference, I was overjoyed because although I had absolutely not thought about it, suddenly it brought together so many ideas and so many thoughts for me. So here they are in no particular order whatsoever. Firstly, I feel that discussion of mixed and socialist economies died down just when it became urgently necessary, particularly because of capitalism's increasing financialization and productive debility, because of the successes of socialism, which have become more manifest over recent decades, and both of which the pandemic has underscored very, very strongly. As late as the 1980s, discussion of socialist and mixed economies was actually quite strong. I mean, I remember as a graduate student reading Alec Nove's work, for example, with great interest. And of course, interest in these matters was particularly strengthened by perestroika and glasnost, the idea that this was a time when we could reshape socialist economies to become better socialist economies and so on. And at the same time, the depredations of neoliberalism were making it very, very important coherent to oppose the idea that free markets are the solution. And in particular, I feel that two schools of thought in particular, developmental state theorists and the varieties of capitalism literature, the models of capitalism literature, try to emphasize that actually existing capitalist economies were already mixed economies, and that they needed to be, that this needed to be understood, contrary to the dogmas of neoliberalism. However, after 1989, 1991, the zeitgeist of the end of history seemed to conquer all, and there was very little interest in discussing these things anymore. Capitalism and liberal democracy, according to Francis Fukuyama, seem to have swept all before them. And around this time, and pardon me, I know I'm now criticizing Marxism while being a Marxist, but I feel that there are many currents within Marxism that have not played a constructive role. So I'm going to at least say a few things about that. So there has been a tendency on the left, particularly among the most intellectually coherent of the left currents, namely Marxism, to lionize capitalism. And in this, they are following not Marx, but Schumpeter. And this tendency had already been revived in the 1970s. And by the 1990s, it had really come into its own. There was, moreover, very little serious Marxist critique of financialization, and many even celebrated the increasingly financialized capitalism as representing the strength rather than the debility of capitalism. And the widening of this type of capitalism around the world, which was far from universal, was celebrated again by many critical and Marxist scholars as representing a globalization and empire. Of course, they were critical of it, but they tended to assume that this was accomplished or would be accomplished very soon. And in this, therefore, there was very little acknowledgement of opposition and resistance to these processes. A penultimate point I would make is that there was therefore also a lot of misunderstanding of actually existing socialisms. And today, this particularly applies to China. The anti-China views proliferate on the left, in which, basically China is seen as essentially capitalist and authoritarian. And many on the left simply join imperialism's attacks on China and so on, and express a general disdain for anti-imperialist resistance as third worldism, that somehow you are thinking that third worldism is a good thing. And finally, then, amid the celebration of capitalism's Schumpeterian prodigious productivity, which of course today lies in tatters, the left often neglects the question of how to organize production, because it has taken for granted for so long that capitalism was going to solve this problem. And we now really see that it does anything but. So instead of focusing on matters of distribution and redistribution alone, we have to really go back to thinking about what it will take to organize production, particularly organizing increasingly the production of direct use values rather than the production of value. This neglect of production is particularly reflected in the increasing popularity of universal basic income, in which the advocates don't really give much thought to what people are supposed to buy with the pieces of paper they are handed, whether it is weekly or monthly, etc. So there is very little thought given to how to organize the production of those things that are necessary and production in general. So I will leave it there. Thank you very much. And thanks for your initiative, Attila, because it's absolutely brilliant. And oh, one other thing, I hope very much that this is going to be an ongoing event, because it's not just something we are going to do this year and forget about it in future years. I think we should continue it for many years to come, until we have socialism, basically. Thank you.
Absolutely, Radhika, it's going to be. Thank you very much. Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Radhika. Thank you for the insights. And I think one very important thing, one very important theme of this conference is that to go against the general tendency of homogenization, like homogenistic kind of tendency of the past socialist experimentation, and the general idea that has tended to view all socialist practices as some sort of similar and some sort of state capitalist oriented system was one of the things that has to be dealt with. And the other thing is that the tendency which considers socialism as a failure instead of considering the other side of socialist experimentation, because there are lots of achievements, lots of success stories again, within the same experiment. And therefore, I hope this conference would highlight one way or the other into the diverse and the dynamics of the socialist experimentation. At the same time, also highlights the success stories that are important over the past decades. And so, with this, I would give the chance to Professor Tamas Kroos. And Professor Tamas Kroos is a scholar of the Soviet and Russian history, Professor Emeritus at Eötvös Loránd University of Budapest. His book titled Reconstructing Lenin, an Intellectual Biography was awarded the Deutsche Memorial Prize in 2015, and the Friendship of People Award in Russia, which he received for his academic work in 2014. He is the founding member of Esmelet Journal, which means consciousness in English, when translated to English. That was established in 1989. He has accomplished a theoretical and organizational work to keep the left-wing thought alive in the Eastern Europe and in Hungary. He is the editor of a wide range of books in Russia and in Hungarian, and he has published extensively on issues related to the theory of socialism in different languages. And Professor Tamas has also some other things to share with us about his memorandum, and therefore I would give the floor to Professor Tamas.
Please unmute yourself. Tamás, microphone. Just click on the microphone, or maybe András, you can unmute him.
I only can
Most jó? Most hallható vagyok?
Very good, very good. Yes, go ahead.
Igen. Köszönöm szépen a szót.
For these kind words, and primarily let me welcome everyone on behalf of the editorial board of Eszmélet, so consciousness, friends, comrades, colleagues, everyone. And by having said so, let me express my gratitude to that extremely huge organizational work that was completed by Attila Meleg and his colleagues, because you've worked extremely hard in order to organize today's conference. But of course, I'm telling so not only on behalf of the editorial board, but I think on behalf of every single person in the audience. Well, let me raise your attention to 2 or 3 primary issues in connection with the topic of the conference, which closely relate to the fact that was mentioned by Fikadu Ayan, and I think it would be really great to publish a short memorandum, a short document, and hereby I like to just draft the most important points of such a document. Our journal has been operating for 32 years, and if I have a look at the audiences, then I can see that starting from our Russian friends to Savas Massas from Greece, or Alan Freeman from England, I can see so many familiar faces. I do not want to list every one of you, but you know, it's a great tradition where we have been right now. So primarily what I like to emphasize is that only such movement exists that has traditions, that has a past. Without tradition, without past, a movement is non-existent. So this conference pretty obviously has a tradition or an importance paying attention to traditions. We'd like to make socialism and socialist ideologies as accessible for everyone. However, it's also pretty clear that simply focusing on theory and simply focusing on nurturing traditions is not enough. You know, it was, or it might have been interesting 32 years ago. However, today in 2021, what is most important is to highlight that this is a conference of practical importance. So this conference takes it really serious. I mean, that serious that capitalism, the existence of capitalism is of course is of no doubt. This system is facing severe problems. We have to clarify that to every single party all around the world. I mean, capitalism has some kind of we can say the symptoms of some deadly disease in capitalism, and as a result we really need to provide alternatives as opposed to capitalism. And I think nowadays it's becoming even more important, and we have to construct this alternative, but this should be an international one. So it cannot be implemented, or it cannot be just created or drafted in a single country. So what I'm telling you is that there is no other alternative against capitalism but socialism, because there hasn't been anything else. Of course, we can make up various fuzzy or interesting things, but you know, scientifically speaking, these do not exist. Socialism is the only single existing alternative. So as a result, we have to pay attention to what we have as a heritage of the great Marxist philosopher, namely perspective needs to be drafted in the right manner. And based on Lenin, this is what he mentioned back in 1924. However, in the 1930s in Moscow, he also did mention a very interesting idea. So we need a bidirectional reconstruction. And this was referred to by him as tertium datu. So this is the third opportunity. So we have in between bad decisions and bad directions, we need to strive for a good one. And in the history of socialism, or he did apply this to the history of socialism. So George Lukács said that all the distortions of socialism, and as opposed to this, the restoration of capitalism, are the two wrong directions. So this is what we have to avoid. So we have to avoid getting back to the past, and we have to avoid serving capitalism, or acting as if we were servants of capitalism, and this is what is being done in the majority of Hungarian Hungarian population. So so this is one of the problem, or this is one of the topic that I consider to be really important, to be practice-oriented. And well, here comes the other momentum, namely this entire socialist idea. And here I think we need to think about this, we need to think like this during the conference as well. So we need to think about socialism as an organized mass movement, because without an organized mass movement, all these would only have some theoretical interest. Okay, 100 or 150 white collars gather together, and you know, in Hungary we fight capitalism every single week whenever there is no COVID-19. However, nowadays, even in Hungary, an ever increasing number of leftist groups, many of them have already been listed, so they have realized the importance thereof. And this is exactly what you can also feel in the editorial board. So for example, a personal friend of mine and a comrade of mine, for example, László György, who is not even 30 years old. So he's very young, and we can see the generational shift has already happened in our editorial board as well. So whenever I'm speaking about organized movement, I also mean that we need to focus on the next generation. And here in Budapest, I'm speaking in a country which is maybe one of the most reactionary country. And if Ukraine wasn't here, I would say that Hungary is the most reactionary one. And in Europe, we can compete with Estonia, Poland, Lithuania. So there is a huge competition going on. But Ukraine is the number one because they have practically legalized fascism. So capitalism. And this is where I like to conclude my idea. And here comes my very last sentence. So based on our experiences, what I have referred to in my speech do show that capitalism is not going to collapse by itself. Capitalism cannot be excluded as if it was just falling down.
It is not going to trip by itself. Just like in the other countries, the SS would be marching. So, in that respect, the overcoming of capitalism is not going to happen without a mass movement. And this conference, for me, is like as if we had a rising global, Latin American, European mass movement would be forming as an ideology. This is what I wanted to share with you, and thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Professor Tomasz. It's a very practical insight, and we're glad to have you here. And it's really very important that you focus on the practical aspect of the international cooperation, and especially the focus on the youth generation as a way forward in the move against capitalism, which in any way is not going to collapse by itself. And thank you very much. And with this, I would introduce the next speaker. Our next speaker is Esther Horvath. And Esther Horvath is a student at the College of Advanced Studies in Social Theory. Next year, she will be pursuing a master's degree in Cultural Heritage Studies at ELTE, Budapest, and EHESS Paris. She has a broad research interest in critical studies, especially socioeconomic context of the cultural production. And let's hear from Esther. Esther,
yes, hello.
The floor is yours now.
Thank you very much. So I would like to welcome everyone in the name of the College of Advanced Studies for Social Theory. It is very good that I'm speaking after Tamás because he spoke of the next generations who are upcoming in Hungary for the social and economical change. And I'm happy to say that the generations are growing in our college. So our college was established in the 80s, and it's been the forward of critical and leftist thinking since that time. And so many of our graduated students are currently working and taking action in the other groups and journals that are organizing this conference. So our aim is basically to give knowledge and give purpose and tools for the students to make sense of the world that is surrounding them in a way that is non-conform exactly to the status quo or to what or to how they usually explain capitalism to them. So basically, we are welcoming students from all fields. It doesn't matter if they are studying literature or economics or philosophy or other kinds of stuff, or even mechanical engineering. We have engineers also in our college, but it matters that they should be socially engaged and to have an interest in or at least a suspense that something is not right with the world order or with how our economy is going right now. We have lots of classes or classes that we are organizing for ourselves and which are non-hierarchical, so they are more like roundtables where everyone should express their thoughts and contribute to the class. And we have these classes on broad topics. Next year, for example, we are going to have a class on China and on various topics of political economy, on feminism, and yeah, and lots of topics. And then we are also trying to contribute to the activist environment here in Budapest and in Hungary. There are activist groups who have grown out of our college, which are especially active in the housing situation in Budapest, for example. Yeah, so I just wanted to reassure you that there are institutions such as these where college students are thinking about how to change the economy and how to change our environment and our world order. So we are happy to hear from you from all over the world, from all over the universities and the great thinkers before us. So thank you for coming to this conference.